Record.
It's the 11th of Ellul. A few days ago, I spoke about the whole issue of forgiving others. I want to go back to that because being Mavata, giving in, was a basic tenet of Rebbetzin Kanievsky's existence. And many people say that it was actually one of her outstanding attributes. I spoke earlier about Rav Kanievsky, Zecher Tzaddik Livracha. So I want to just mention this instance and these ideas from Rebbetzin Kanievsky. Through her actions, and if you read anything about her and her stories, she demonstrated frequently that by, in inverted commas, giving in, not only does one earn merit in Hashem's eyes for reward in the world to come, but it also demonstrates positive outcomes which are often visible even in this world. Rebbe Kanievsky often told the following story that I'd like to share with you. The Rebbetzins' father was Rav Yosef Shalom Eliashiv. And at one stage in his life, he had to be in hospital before Shabbat in Hadassah in Kerem Hospital. A group of Rav Eliashiv's grandchildren and a community activist who knew the doctors in the hospital went with him to spend Shabbat with him in the hospital. And the grandchildren arranged for a minyan with a Sefer Torah to be present at Rav Eliashiv's bedside. But they didn't have a Balkara. Now, one of the grandchildren, walking through one of the corridors in the hospital, saw a young boy standing outside his mother's hospital room. This boy was about 16 years old. And the grandchild turned around to this young man and said, "Are you by any chance a Balkara? Can you lane?" And the boy responded, he said, "Well, I can lane this week's Parsha." "Can you be the Balkara for Rav Eliashiv?" "Absolutely," said the boy. The boy read the Torah beautifully. And after davening, Rav Eliashiv called him over to say thank you. And afterwards, the boy's father went to speak to Rav Eliashiv. He said, "There's actually a very interesting story behind my son knowing how to lane this week's Parsha." He said, 3 years ago this week was my son's bar mitzvah Shabbat. I told the gabbai of the shul that my son would be laning in shul, and he agreed. There's no problem. 3 days before the bar mitzvah, the gabbai called us and said he's actually got a problem, got a bit of a dilemma. He'd inadvertently become confused and agreed to allow another bar mitzvah boy to lane that week in shul. And the gabbai was at a loss. What should he do? Who should lane? So after giving the matter considerable thought, this man's son, the boy who we met in the corridor not long ago, decided that despite the extensive preparation he went through to lane for the first time in his life for his bar mitzvah, he would allow the other boy to lane. And he said, perhaps in the merit that my son gave in at his bar mitzvah, he had the honor of reading the Torah for Rav Eliashiv today. And Rav Eliashiv smiled and he said, "What brings you to the hospital?" "Well," the man said, "my wife's already been here for 6 weeks. The doctors have so far been unable to give her a diagnosis. They don't really understand what's wrong with her." The community activist who was there with Rav Eliashiv overheard the conversation and he said, "Well, there's a specialist coming to see Rav Eliashiv tomorrow. I will ask him to also look at your wife, look at her medical chart, look at her notes, and see what can be done." The next day, the specialist came by, and after he'd finished attending to Rav Eliashiv, he examined the young Balkara's mother and diagnosed a very rare disease that had eluded the doctors who were working on her so far. He prescribed a regime of medication that immediately improved her condition. And several days later, she was discharged from hospital, obviously full of gratitude. When recounting this story, Rebbetzin Kanievsky always drove home the point. Although the boy didn't lame on the Shabbat of his bar mitzvah, despite having prepared everything to enable him to lame from that parsha, Hashem paid him back by having him lame for Rav Elyashiv and thereby helping him find a cure for his mother's illness. A beautiful story with a very strong message to remind us that we have to give him.